Streets of New Capenna drops in a couple of weeks. This is going to be the limited guide to go over the cards, archetypes, and top commons in each color and family. All right, first up is the mechanics. Each family, this is a 3-color set, is going to get its own mechanic. Starting with Casualty, this is going to be primarily in black, blue, and red. I think exclusively in black, blue, and red. But what this does is when you cast a Casualty spell, you can sacrifice a creature with power greater than or equal to the casualty cost. So in this case, 3 power or greater. When you do, you get to copy that spell. Really good if you have sacrifice fodder, like Blitz cards. Blitz is you pay the Blitz cost, you cast the creature for that, it gets haste, and when it dies, you draw a card, and then you sack it at the end of the turn, or you can sack it to a casualty spell. Next up, we have Shield. This is kind of a neat one as well. I think this is going to be the regeneration replacement, but what Shield does, when a creature is damaged or destroyed, you remove the shield counter instead of getting rid of the creature. Now, one thing to note, if you have a 2/2, your opponent deals it 1 damage, you still lose that shield counter, even if the damage dealt wasn't lethal. Up next, we have Connive. I like this one as well. This is just a looting ability, but if you discard a non-land card, you get a +1/+1 counter on the creature. Next up, we have Alliance, and this is a super simple one, but again, very good. Whenever a creature ETBs under your control, you get the Alliance effect. This works with casting a creature spell or any sort of creature token. There's a lot of token synergies in this set. And then we have a returning mechanic as well. That's going to be Hideaway. You're going to only see this on 5 enchantments in the set with Hideaway 5, but basically when you cast them, you look at the top 5 cards of your library, pick one, and then you fulfill some certain task on the enchantment itself. When you do, you can cast that card for free. In the draft, how do we draft a 3-color set? Well, let me tell you. Fixing, fixing, and fixing. First up, I think these are really good first picks. These are some of the top commons in the set. There is one for each family, so each shard is going to get one of these fixing cards. So Shattered Seraph is 7 mana for a 4/4 flyer, which isn't a great rate, but hey, late game, if you got 7 mana, why not, right? The second part of this card is important. 2 mana, colorless mana, exile it from your hand. Target land gets add a white, blue, or black to it, so it fixes your lands. Please note, if you're casting this on a forest, that forest can still tap for green. Also, when you do this, you can still cast your Shattered Seraph. And that goes for all of these cards. So even if you exile it from your hand, you can still cast the card later. Up next, we have the new little Evolving Wilds family variant. So the Brokers family is green, white, and blue. What this does, when it ETBs, you sack it, go find a forest, plains, or an island, and you gain a life. Next up, the secret to drafting a 3-color set is to draft 2 colors and then splash the third, or just draft 2. But you're going to get a common land for each of the allied color pairs that can sack to draw a card as well. So keep an eye out for those. All 3 of these, I think, are first pickable, with the best being the Shattered Seraph style cards in each family. One other thing I wanted to bring up is the removal traps in this set. I think there's a lot of them, starting with the casualty cards that we talked about. If they're at instant speed, they can blank your removal, because if you target my creature with removal, I can just sack it to the casualty and still get value. There's also a lot of token strategies in this set because of Alliance, and you definitely don't want to target tokens with your removal spells, because tokens are usually worth like half a card. And there's lots of ways to modify those tokens or use those tokens, so that's another thing that devalues removal. And lastly, Shield, as we talked about, this blanks a shield counter, trades for your Murder or your Strangle, not necessarily going up on cards there either. So something to note. All right, the families, or shards as it were, there's going to be 5 of them, starting with base blue in Obscura. Blue's allies are black and white, and that trend is gonna follow for all the families here. So base black is Maestros, allied with red and blue. Riveteers, base red, allied with green and black. Cabaretti, base green. and the brokers are base white. Those are the 5 families, but we're going to take away one of those colors and try to draft the ally color pairs. So ideally, you start in a 2 color pair and then figure out whichever family is open, if it's Obscura or Maestros if you're in blue-black, if it's Maestros or Riveteers if you're in black-red. Same thing goes for red-green. You want to be Riveteers or Cabaretti. Cabaretti, your brokers if you're Seleznia, or brokers or Obscura if you're Azorius. So this is how you're going to want to start your draft, is by finding that open ally color pair. All right, into the individual colors. Let's start with white with some best buds. 3 mana for a 3/2 Mage's Attendant. When it ETBs, you make a 1/1 wizard token. This triggers alliance creatures twice. Also, it's 4 power and 3 toughness on 2 bodies for 3 mana. Super efficient. And the token has text on it. So this is going to screw people up. Your opponents are going to forget that you have it, and they're going to tap out for removal, and you're going to be able to get them. So this is a relevant ability as well. Super strong, super efficient, does everything you want to do. Next up, Hello Citizens Crowbar. Again, super versatile, 2 mana equipment. When it ETBs, you get a citizen token and you attach it to it, so you get a 2/2 for 2. And then you can sack the Crowbar to destroy an artifact or enchantment. If your citizen dies, you can re-equip this, so just super versatile. Last up, rumor has it that we have a Rumor Gatherer. 3 mana for a 2/1. The alliance stuff we talked about. Whenever another creature ETBs, you scry 1, and if it happens a second time, you get to draw a card. So if you have Rumor Gatherer in play, you cast Mage's Attendant, you scry 1, draw a card. Super efficient, super good. If you can keep this thing on the battlefield, it does have a somewhat problematic casting cost with 2 white in a 3-color set, but if you can do that, super good. All right, into the commons. One of the most busted commons we've seen in a while is Inspiring Overseer. No doubt the best common in white. 3 mana for a 2/1 flyer. When it ETBs, you gain a life, draw a card. Then we have Rafine's Informant, just a very efficient 2-drop. It's a 2/1. It connives when it ETBs. If your land's light, you can discard the non-land and make it a 3/2, so it's super efficient. If your land heavy, you can discard a land and just have it draw you a card, because you didn't need the land anyway. So I think there's going to be a lot of folks who are trying to get their value off connive and discard non-lands when they really shouldn't. But keep in mind, you can just loot away a land if you don't need the land. So either way, super versatile, super cheap, super efficient. Last up, I was confused on this one. I didn't like a lot of the white commons, but Scry Crier I think has potential. It's a citizen, and there's lots of citizen synergies in white and green. And it's a 2 mana 1/1 flying lifelink. And anytime you're able to give an evasive lifelink creature any sort of boost, it's super good. Don't pay any attention to that second ability, 4 mana, you and opponent, draw a card. I don't think you're ever going to use that. But if you do, your back's probably against the wall, and maybe it helps you out. But I think this card has potential. Up next, we have blue. This is the Connive color. I love me a Mana War, and this is a pretty good one. 5 mana for a 3/2. When it ETBs, you connive, and when it connives, you bounce a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So this thing can be a 4/3 that bounces something. Usually it's probably going to be a 3/2, but because by the time you have 5 mana, you really don't need lands. But if you have 2 spells in your hand, you draw into a spell, then you get a 4/3 bounce a card. Super efficient. 4 power is always good. Payoff for it is a returning card from Throne of Eldraine, Fairy Vandal. 2 mana for a 1/2 flash flyer is already fine, but whenever you draw your second card each turn, it gets a counter. Anytime you connive on your turn, that's going to be your second card that you draw. There's tons of incidental connive cards in this format, so you're going to be able to trigger this thing quite a bit. Last up, we have some secrets. Little Chats. For 2 mana, casualty 1, instant speed. We highlighted this one a little earlier. I think this card's really, really good because of the top common in blue that we'll get to. But you look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, the other on the bottom. So if you casualty this spell, for 2 mana at instant speed, you pick the 2 best of the top 4 cards of your library, which is usually going to be spells So it draws you 2 spells. I mean, just a fantastic rate. And the reason for that is because the best common, I think, in blue is going to be Expendable Lackey. 1 mana, 1/1. You can exile it from your yard to make an unblockable 1/1 fish. And you're going to see that a couple times pop up in blue and in blue-white, where you get these unblockable fishes. And I think this card is super strong because you can sack it to casualty. There's a mill theme in blue-black, so if you mill it, you don't care. So there's just lots of uses. It could be a speed bump. You can play it on turn 1. Doesn't matter. Just a really, really solid card. Next up, I have Rooftop Nuisance, 3 mana, casualty 1. Another one of these that's good, a good target to sack with Expendable Lackey. Tap a creature, doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. If you can multiply this, if you can times this by 2, you're tapping down 2 creatures and drawing 2 cards. That's super efficient for 3 mana. And I think in this format that blue wants to be aggressive. It's very evasive with these unblockable fishes. So this helps you win the race, right? Next up, we have Echo Inspector. 4 mana, 2/3 flyer, connives when it ETBs. Usually when you're at 4 mana, you're not looking to discard non-lands, but a 2/3 flyer that draws your card for 4 is really good anyway. If you did need, or if you are discarding a spell for whatever reason, you just get a 3/4 flyer for 4, which is just fine. Up next, we have black. As always, we get some cheap, good removal in black. Grisly Sigil looks pretty unassuming, but if you can cast it for the casualty cost, it becomes very good. So for 1 mana, it hits a creature for 1, and you gain a life. But if you copy it and target the same creature, if the creature was dealt non-combat damage this turn, it deals 3 damage to it, and you gain 3. So how that plays out, the first copy hits it for 1, you gain 1. The second copy of this card hits it for 3, and you gain 3. So the creature takes 4, you gain 4, all for 1 mana. Super cheap. Next one, Find Me in the Club Night Clubber. 3 mana with a blitz cost of 3 for a 2/2. When it ETBs, creatures your opponent control get -1/-1 until end of turn. Kills all their fish tokens, kills all their citizens, all their X1s, and it opens up attacks for you. So this card is super strong. And if you blitz this in, you don't really care about the 2/2. You get to draw a card off of it. So really, really powerful uncommon, I think. Last up, I have kind of a weird one, but hear me out. Dust Mangler, 7 mana, 5/4. When it ETBs, well, not when it ETBs, as an additional cost, you have to sack a creature, discard a card, or pay for life. But when it ETBs, each opponent sacrifices a creature, discard a card, and loses 4 life. So they have to do all of that. If you have a way to recur this, blink this, get this back, cast it again, it pretty much ends the game, right? Your opponent would take 8 life if you would lose 8 life if you cast this twice. They would sacrifice 2 creatures, discard 2 cards. Although the odds of them having cards in their hand at 7 mana, pretty small. But red-green has a treasure theme, so you might be able to get there and ramp it out. Top commons. First up, I have Girder Goons, 5 mana for a 4/4 with a blitz of 4. When it dies, you make a 2/2 rogue. So the play pattern with this usually is going to be I blitz it in, hit you for 4, it dies, I draw a card, I make a 2/2, which is really good for 4 mana. Sometimes if you have like 6, 7 mana, you can casualty this thing as well and get even more value. Sometimes if the board state demands it, you just have a 4/4 for 5. So very versatile. You're not going to want like 4 of these in your deck. 2 or 3 is max, but it's still very, very good. Next up, another great casualty fodder sacrifice card. Burglar Rats is back. Virus Beetle is back. Ravenous Rats is back. That's a 1/1 for 2 that causes your opponent to discard. Next up, we have one of the most efficient good removal spells we've seen at common. That's Murder. For 3 mana, it destroys a creature at instant speed. Like we said, there's a lot of removal traps in this set, so you just want to watch out for that. Up next, we have red. So, wanted to start with a Shield Punisher. 3 mana, instant speed, deal 3 to anything, can go face. Players can't gain life and damage can't be prevented. In parentheses there, they even call it out. Shield counters doesn't matter. It goes right through the shield, still kills the creature, because what the shield does is it prevents that damage and the shield goes away. Since the damage can't be prevented, the shield goes away and the creature takes the damage. Then we get our Punch Man, Pugnacious Pugilist for 5 mana, 4/4 Blitz of 4. When it attacks, you get a 1/1 Devil that it is attacking. And then when it dies, it deals 1, it pings a target. If you can attack with this thing, if you can cast it and attack with it twice, you're probably going to win the game. If you blitz it in, it's still really good. Lastly, I think this is my early vote for best build around uncommon in the set. Pyrosludge Arsonist. 3 mana for a 2/2. Tap 1 in the card. Deals X damage to any target where X is the number of permanents you sacrifice. We've already talked a lot about casualty stuff and blitz creatures that are being sacked. There's also treasure tokens in this set. So when you sack a treasure, that counts for this too. So it's not impossible for this to deal 3-4 damage some turns. And it can deal it to any target. It can go face, creatures, you name it. For top commons, first I have Exhibition Magician. 3 mana 2/1. When it ETBs, you can get a citizen token, 1/1, or a treasure token. Super versatile. Depends on what your deck wants to do. It's always going to give you a good option. Strangle's up next. Really efficient removal spells. I know removal's not the best in this set, but dealing 3 damage for 1 mana is just efficient. Even though it's sorcery speed and it doesn't go face, it's still very good. It's no lightning bolt, but come on. Next up, we have Big Score. Love this card. 4 mana, instant speed. Draw 2, create 2 treasure tokens. As an additional cost, you got to discard a card, but that's no problem. If you're making a ton of treasures, you probably don't need all the land in the world, so you can just pitch a land. Next up, we have green. I think Exile is going to be somewhat relevant in this set. There's a lot of recursion and stuff. Another thing to note, this looks like a bite spell, but it's not quite. It deals X to target creature or planeswalker, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So if you have 2 3/3s, your opponent kills 1 in response, you still deal 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker. They'd have to kill all of your creatures to blank this. Next up, we have a little 5-color plant, and I think it's going to be easy to get to this. Not easy, but if you're in red-green, there's so many incidental treasure tokens in this format that I think you can get there. It's a 2 mana artifact. When it ETBs, you get a 1/1 citizen. You can sack it as a treasure, which would make you sad, but what you really want to do is late game, add Wooburg, and draw 3, and refuel. Next up, we always got a big dope in green. Cleanup Crew, 6 mana, 6/6. It's super versatile, though. You can do, the normal mode is gain 4 life. But if your opponent has an artifact or enchantment, you're really off the board, it's going to kill them. And then if your opponent's really recursive or they care about stuff in their yard, you can exile a card from their yard. All right, top commons. One of the other busted, broken, pushed commons is Jewel Thief. 3 mana for a 3/3 Vigilance Trample. Stop right there. It's already crazy good. But it makes a treasure when it ETBs. Just insane. First pick this. It's just crazy. Next up, Prize Fight. I actually really like this fight spell. It's 2 mana instant speed fight, but you get to create that treasure token, so that helps your ramp, fix, splash, you name it. Really good in a 3-color set. Lastly, I had trouble with this, but I love the curve, right? So Kaldia's Strong Arm. It's a 5 mana 2/3. When it ETBs, you get 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature. But if you play your Jewel Thief on 3, you can blitz this in for 4 the next turn, put the counters on the thief, and all of a sudden you're attacking with a 5/5 Vigilance Trample. And of course you get to draw a card with that blitz, and then you're swinging with the 2/3. So I think that's a lot of pressure. Turns your Jewel Thief into a huge threat that has to be dealt with. Draws you a card. Really strong. Lastly, we got our colorless things. There is a fixing card that's lesser than the rest, but I still wanted to call it out. That's Ominous Parcel. It's versatile, but it doesn't do either of those things particularly in an efficient manner. It's 1 to play, 2 sack it, get a basic land, 5 sack it, deal 4 to a creature. So it plays both well. Or it doesn't play both well, but it plays both sides here. There's an equipment that I think is kind of broken. This is like the Capenna equivalent of a Tommy gun, but Arc Spitter's 1 to play, 1 to equip. An equipped creature has 1. This creature deals 1 damage to target creature that's blocking it. You can use this as much as you want on as many creatures that are blocking your creature. So there's no way for your opponent to deal with this unless they have more toughness blocking your creature than you have mana available. So I think that's crazy strong. Last up, Treasure. This is the 3-color set, so you're going to want ways to make it. Halo Scarab is just a little unassuming 2/1 for 2. You can trade it off, you can sack it, use it for casualty, whatever. And then when it's in your yard, you can exile it to make a treasure token. I don't think this is going to be a high pick, but if you have a pretty ambitious mana base, you might want to consider it. All right, let's rank the individual colors, and then we'll get into the ally color pairs. So the best color, I think, is going to be red. Really good treasure synergy, sacrifice synergy, good value all around. Just a really, really strong color. To me, this color looks fantastic for splashing, fixing, ramping. It's good removal, you name it. Next up, black. Really good sacrifice synergy, good blitz value like red has, and it has efficient removal like murder as well. Third, white. Connive value, plus it has that broken 3-mana common 2/1 flyer that draws your card, gains your life. And I think Connive is underrated as a mechanic as well. I think that mechanic's gonna be pretty good too. Next we have blue, good uncommon payoffs for drawing 2 for Connive, and then you also get that really good 1-drop that has good casualty payoff. That's a good casualty sack fodder, and then you have good Connive value as well. Lastly, we have green with that amazing Jewel Thief common. However, other than Jewel Thief, I don't really know what I want to do in green at 1, 2, or 3 mana. That's really strong. So maybe that'll change as the format goes on, but to me it looks like green might have a weak early game. All right, into the allied color pairs. So each allied color pair has kind of its own thing it's doing. So in blue-black, it wants to get 5 different mana values in the graveyard. How it enables that is by Connive discarding non-land permanents, by casualty sacking permanents to help fill up your yard. It also has self-mill, like Snooping Newsy, which is a 2/2 for 2, mills for 2 when it ETBs, and then if you do have 5 or more MVs in the yard, it gets +1/+1, and lifelink. Next up is Syndicate Infiltrator, 4-mana flyer. It's a 3/3, becomes a dragon, a 5/5 flyer if you get those 5 MVs in the yard. And lastly, Tainted Indulgence, which is another enabler and payoff here. 2 mana, instant speed, draw 2 is really efficient. You discard a card unless you have 5 or more MVs in the yard. But if you discard that card, you're adding Tainted Indulgence to the yard, you're adding your discarded card into the yard, so then you're help filling that up. We do have some role players as well in payoffs in single colors like Sewer Croc. Love this card. Love the art. 6 mana, 4/6. Tap 4, can't be blocked, but it costs only 1 blue mana if you have 5 or more MVs in the yard. So really efficient. It's going to end games along with your little unblockable fish tokens. Dig Up the Body. Love this one as well. 3 mana, instant speed, mill 2. Return a creature card from your yard to your hand with casualty 1. So you can double up on this. Mill 4, get 2 creatures back, all for 3 mana at instant speed. Really, really good. Last, we have Deal Gone Bad. This is instant speed removal. 4 mana. Creature gets -3/-3, and target player mills 3 cards. So you're going to want to target yourself. One thing to note, the -3/-3 does get around shield tokens because a 0 toughness creature is just going to die regardless of a shield. Next up, my vote for one of the strongest color pairs. That's going to be red-black, sacrifice synergies, and it sacrifices stuff with treasure, cannon fodder creatures, and casualty. Body Dropper is a payoff and an enabler, like we saw with Snooping Newsy. 2 mana, 2/2. When you sack a creature, it gets a counter, and for red and a black, you can sack a creature and give it menace until end of turn. Up next, another cool one. This is a real clock for your opponent. 4 mana for a 3/4. When you sack 1 or more creatures, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. it triggers once each turn. So if you sacrifice something on your turn, something on your opponent's turn, that's 4 damage. That's pretty good. Last up, not a fan of this card. I think this is one of the weakest of the Signpost Uncommons. 2 mana for Fatal Grudge. You get to draw a card, but you have to sack a non-land permanent as you cast it, and then your opponent, it's an edict effect. Usually you're going to sack a creature, your opponent's going to sack a creature, you're going to draw a card. Not great, but I still think this ally color pair is really strong because of cards like Raffine's Silencer. 3 mana for a 1/1. When it ETBs, you connive, and when it dies and a creature an opponent controls gets -X/-X. So if you have an instant speed way to sack this, you can even use this as a combat trick. Next up, great sack fodder here with Unlucky Witness. 1 mana 1/1. When it dies, you exile the top 2 cards of your library, and then you can play the best one. Super easy. And lastly, we talked about Pyrosludge Arsonist before, but want to bring it up again. I think this card is busted, and it's great in this deck and in the treasure deck as well. Up next is the treasure deck, and that's red-green. This focuses around using treasures to buff your stuff, like Jetmir's Fixer, which is 2 mana 2/2, and for 2 mana it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, which is already just fine. Makes this card really tough to block. But if you use mana from a treasure to activate the ability, it gets a counter, and then this card can get out of control really fast. Up next, we have Security Rocks. Just kind of a big 4 mana 5/4 is not great, but if you can cheat this out for 2 mana and double spell some turn, it's a lot of power and toughness on the board. Last up for the Signpost, one of my favorite build-arounds at Uncommon in this set is Stimulus Package. 4 mana with an ETBs, you make 2 treasure tokens. You can sacrifice a treasure at instant speed, as many as you want, anytime, to make a 1/1 citizen token. Super strong. All right. For some of those role players, Glittermonger, love this card. It's a little bit overcosted, but 4 mana 1/4, tap, make a treasure token. I love the fact that he is selling Moxen there. Counterfeit Moxen for sure. Up next, Riveteers Requisitioner. Anything that's going to make treasures you're going to want. 2 mana 3/1, you can blitz it in for 3, and when it dies, you make a treasure. We talked about Big Score. Love this card. Fits perfectly into this type of deck. Makes 2 treasure tokens. Draws you more cards. What's not to love? Up next, we have the Seleznia Citizen synergy pair. Starting with Civil Servant. 2 mana 2/3. Efficient already. When it attacks, you can tap an untapped citizen to give it +1/+0 and lifelink. So super efficient lifelinker, impossible to race for 2 mana. Super strong. At common. Next up, we have Darling of the Masses. If you can get this thing in, I think it's super strong. But it gives all your citizens +1/+0. It's a 2/4 for 4. And whenever you can attack, you make a citizen token. That becomes a 2/1. So that's really strong as well, if you can get it in. Lastly, we have Ceremonial Groundbreaker. 3 mana. Give a creature +2/+1 and trample. And the equip cost for a citizen is super cheap. Makes all your tokens into 3/2 tramplers, which is really good. Makes your Civil Servant into a 4/4. And then if you can make it a 5/4 lifelinker with trample, I mean, that's just crazy. Crazy stuff. If you can get it to work. I think this guild might be okay though. Basically for the role players, you just want to make citizen tokens any way you can. So Warm Welcome for 3 mana at instant speed is going to put a citizen token into play, so you can use this to ambush an X1. And then you can use it, you look at the top 5, pick a creature card, your best creature from those top 5, so one of your enablers or payoffs for citizen tokens, put that into your hand, replaces itself. I think this card's pretty good. Up next, we have Angelic Observer. We'll have to see. I mean, if you're really doing the citizen thing and you get a lot of them, you're not just getting citizens from creature tokens, but a lot of your creatures are typed that way as well. You can get this thing down to 3 mana, 2 mana for a 3/3 flare, and you can double spell and play this. That's a lot of power and toughness on the board. Lastly, we talked about Citizen's Crowbar. before, but I do like this card. It's just super efficient. It's equipment, buffs your citizens, and then gives you a citizen as well. Up next, I'm really excited to play this. I want to see how this thing plays out. This is Counter Synergy in blue-white. Starting with Celestial Regulator. This, I think, is a very aggressive, evasive deck, like blue-white skies usually is, but this is more aggressive than I think we're used to. So 3 mana for a 2/3 flyer is already fantastic. When it ETBs, you tap a creature you don't control, and if you have a counter on anything, on any creature, that creature doesn't untap during its next untap step. So it locks it down like a frost links. Very efficient. I think I'm going to lose a lot of games to this card. It's really going to tick me off. But Exotic Pets, 3 mana, instant speed, make 2 unblockable fish tokens, and for each kind of counter among creatures you control, put a counter of that kind on one of those tokens. So if you have a shield counter, one of your fish gets a shield. If you have a +1/+1 counter from Connive, you get a 2/2 unblockable and a 1/1. That's a lot of unblockable power on the board that your opponent has to deal with. Really, really good. Up next, Metropolis Angel. This card seems really neat as well. 4 mana, 3/1 flyer. Whenever you attack with one or more creatures with counters on them, draw a card. Since a lot of your cards are going to be evasive and have counters, this is really going to draw you a lot of cards. So I think this card is quite strong if you're doing the thing. The play pattern for this is on turn 4, you cast it and then swing with your counter creature to draw a card immediately. So even, if your opponent removes this thing because it has 1 toughness, it dies to, a strong wind, you still get your card back. Some of the role players, anything that's going to put a counter on, right? So Swooping Protector is kind of a fun one. A 2/1 flash flyer for 4. When it ETBs, it comes in with a shield counter, so you can ambush your opponent's flyer and then crack back with a 2/1 flying creature the next turn. I think this card's kind of fun. Broker's Veteran is an interesting one. It's a 2/1 for 2. It doesn't have a shield counter on it, but when it dies, you can put a shield counter on any creature you control, your best creature, which is really neat. And then lastly, we talked about Echo Inspector before. 4 mana, 2/3 flyer. When it ETBs, it connives. So usually in this type of deck, you're going to want it to get that +1/+1 counter for your synergies. And then it's just a very efficient 3/4 flyer. All right. Now we're going to get into the families. So each family is going to have 3 signposts starting with a charm. I think the Obscura charm is one of the more powerful ones. Each of these are going to be instant speed, 3 mana that are the Obscura colors, so white, blue, and black for Obscura. And you're going to get 3 modes, and you got to pick one. So the first mode here is you return a multicolored permanent with mana value 3 or less from your yard to the battlefield tap. Being able to do that in instant speed is pretty good. You can also counter an instant or sorcery spell, so situationally very, very useful. And lastly, you can destroy target creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. So there's 3 very different modes that are very useful in 3 different situations, which is usually when these charms are at their most effective. Up next, I think this card is pretty bananas as well. 4 mana, 3/4. When you draw a card, you drain your opponent. Since you're always drawing extra cards with Connive, I mean, this card's going to be draining your opponent for 2, sometimes 3 a turn, and that's a really fast clock. You can't race it because you're gaining life, you're draining your opponent, and it's got a big butt. It's 4 toughness. Last up, we have Nimble Larsonist. If you're able to cast this on curve, you're most assuredly going to nab something. It's a 2/1 flyer. When it ETBs, you pick an artifact, instant, or sorcery card from your opponent's hand, and they got to exile it. If it's late in the game, it's not going to do that as often, but sometimes your opponents just hang on to removal, and you'll get to snag one. Even if it doesn't, it's still a 2/1 flyer for 3, which is fine. So I think this card's super efficient, super fun. Not fun to play against. Up next, we have the Maestros. This is casualty, and then getting back instants and sorceries from the yard. There's also, we talked about the 5 MVs in the yard. This is also going to focus on that a little bit with Maestro's Charm. So 3 mana instant speed. Look at the top 5 in your library, put 1 into your hand, the rest into your yard. So that's going to fill up your yard super fast, really strong in that type of deck. You can also drain your opponent for 3 to help you win a race or finish them off. And it's a really, really nice removal spell as well. That's going to deal 5 damage to a creature or planeswalker. So this, I think, is one of the strongest charms that we're going to see. Up next is Organ Hoarder Plus. This card is ridiculous. 3 mana, 3/3. Vampire Rogue. When it ETBs, exile a creature from a yard. If you do that, you look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand, and the rest into the yard. So you get to nug an opponent's creature out of their yard, draw the best of your next 3 cards, and you get a 3/3 body for 3. This card is bananas if you can cast it. Last up, we have Cormela, another really sweet one. This is a weird one, but I love it. A 2/4 haste for 4 mana. Okay. Tap 1 in the card to add Maestro mana to your mana pool, but you can only use that on instant or sorcery spells, and when it dies, you get to return 1 from your graveyard to your hand. So I think the dream curve, or whatever, is you play this on 4 or turn 5, you tap 1 in the card to add 3, play your Maestro's Charm, and then if Cormela dies, you get your Maestro's Charm back. So, pretty neat. Up next, we have the Riveteers, despite the fact that I think this is the most powerful guild or family in the format, it has the weakest uncommons. The Charm has one really, really sneaky good mode, though. So, the first one is your opponent sacks their highest mana value creature or planeswalker. Fine, gonna be useful. The next mode I think is really good. So you cast this at the end of your opponent's turn, exile the top 3 cards of your library until your next end step, you can play those cards. So if you have 5 or 6 mana, you untap, you have 3 cards sitting there, one's probably going to be a land, you play that land, and then you can double spell with those other 2 cards. Super strong. The last mode, exile target player's graveyard, you're very rarely going to use that, but the first 2 modes are good enough. Up next, we have Mr. Orfeo, 4 mana, 2/4. When you attack, double target creature's power until end of turn. Going to be good with blitz creatures that you're getting in with. Green has big dopes, has tramplers, good with evasive things. But, it's just a fine card. Up next, not great, Crew Captain, 4/2 haste for 3. And it has indestructible as long as it ETB'd this turn. It's pretty decent with Mr. Orfeo because it attacks as an 8/2, but your opponent can still chump that, Better to have an evasive creature. All right. Up next, we have Cabaretti. So this is the Go Wide Alliance and Tokens Citizen family. And the charm is all about that Go Wide life. So first mode deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to a creature or planeswalker. Go Wide, yep. The next mode, I think, is really interesting. So creatures you control get +1/+1 and trampled. So mini overrun at instant speed. That is the key. This is going to end a lot of games. If your opponent tries to, chump your 6/6 with a 1/1, you can give it trample at instant speed and just kill your opponent. The last mode is you get to go wide. You get 2 citizen tokens at instant speed as well. The next one, I think this card is super busted. X and Cabaretti mana for 3/1. And when you cast it, you can search your library for a creature card with mana value X or less. So red-green creates a lot of treasure that we talked about. And this thing, so you're going to have a lot of mana. So you're just going to be able to tutor up your bomb, rare, whatever, best creature in your deck. And you're going to get your 3/1. So I think this card is really, really strong. Look forward to smashing people with it. Last up, we have another very good uncommon. Cabaretti has really good uncommons. Brazen Upstart, 3 mana, 4/2 Vigilance. When it dies, look at the top 5 and take the best creature card out of them. So it replaces itself. It's a 4/2 Vigilance that has to be dealt with. Really strong. All right. Last up, we have the Brokers. This is about shield and counter and citizen tokens. Broker's Charm. I think this is one of the weaker charms as well. 3 mana instant. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 and then bites something, so it's fine. Second mode, situationally useful. Destroy target enchantment. And then the last mode, at instant speed, drawing 2 cards for 3 is fine as well. So each mode is decent, but nothing super strong. Up next, we have Disciplined Duelist, a 2/1 for 3 double strike, which is good rate. And then it has a shield counter on it. So tough for your opponents to deal with. It does have the 1 toughness. So anything that gives it -1/-1, like Nightclubber, would take care of this. You'd be pretty sad about that. But if you can get any sort of +1/+1 counters on this or equip it, it becomes very, very difficult to deal with. Last up, Legrella the Magpie. Love this card. Super neat. Can't wait to try this out. 3 mana, 2/3. When it ETBs, you can exile 1 creature your opponent controls and up to 1 creature you control until it dies. When it dies, the exiled cards come back, but yours comes back with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So oftentimes what you can do if your opponent doesn't have a way to deal with this, you just get to exile their best creature and get a 2/3 for 3. So that's really, really strong. But even if they are able to get rid of it, you get your creature back and it comes back buffer. So I really like Legrella. All right, and that's going to do it for me. That is the cards, the colors, the archetypes, the mechanics, all wrapped up. Let me know what you think.